Hi everyone, in this video I'll be covering my pool plans for the upcoming arc in DFFOO Global where Yuri will be featured as a synergy character. You can refer to the cropped infographic on the left hand side to see which events these are, and the infographic was derived from the thewereotter's global forecast. As always, I'll also be including a link in the video description to the full global forecast, so you can check that out as well if you are interested. This time around, I will not be covering the disclaimers for my pool plans. Instead, I will also be placing them in the video description where I think they are probably better placed. Starting off, just to see how I did in the last arc, which was Lunafreya's FRBT arc. There were two banners in the arc that I pulled for. The first was on Lunafreya, where I went gems straight away, trying to score her entire kit since she's a new character in GL. I went until 60,000 gems before I scored her FR, but I did score her burst weapon along the way, which is really nice, so I didn't have to use any burst tokens. On hindsight, I should have gone 3 more multi-pools so that I can redeem the 4 high power stone set from the token shop, but I decided to just stop at 60,000 gems and I used my entire stash of high power stones to max limit break the FR weapon. The next banner that I pulled was on Iroha's FR banner, and I went in with tickets scoring her FR weapon. By the time this event came up, I had very few high power stones. I did get some from the choco board, but I ended up having to sell about say 20-30% of my power stone stash just to be able to get enough high power stones to max limit break Iroha's FR. So at this point in the game, the main bottleneck that I have are high power stones, which actually means that I have to be a bit more selective on the FR weapons that I pull for moving forward. That said, I skipped the other 3 banners. I do already have Ultimacia and Young, and I skipped Sabine's entire banner and event as well. I just used other characters to complete the Shinryu fight there. Alright, so coming to the first event in Yuri's FRBT arc, and this will be the 6th Warrior Quest Area 2. There are going to be 2 banners on this event. The first banner will feature Yuri's newly released FR and BT weapon, alongside the banner mates of Arciela, Gladiolus, and Yuri himself. The second banner will also feature Yuri's FR, but will also feature Eldnarch's BT rerun, and that banner features Eldnarch, Yuffie, and Rydia as banner mates. A little bit about Yuri's newly released BT and FR. Firstly, his BT aura does have a rather unique effect that it actually reduces all enemies' accuracy by 100% as long as his BT aura is up. So that serves as another way of sort of like a damage mitigation effect for the entire party, so long as the enemies don't have any guaranteed hit attacks. His BT aura also provides some boosts to offensive stats, but at this stage of the game, it's pretty similar to most other BT auras in the game in terms of the boost to Brave and HP damage and Brave and HP caps. Yuri's FR will 100% gravity shave, or in other words, set enemies Brave to 0 prior to the Brave attacks coming in, so his FR attack will always guarantee that it will break the enemy no matter how much Brave that they have. As for Yuri's FR conditionals, you will get a plus 30% when you heal your HP during your turn. When you do any holy damage, including off-turn damage, you will plus 5% the force bonus. So you could, for example, holy enchant someone like Kain or Young, or counter attackers such as Oren or Gladiolus, and you will get the 5% bonus when they do their off-turn damage. When Yuri does any holy damage, so this third conditional is tied only to Yuri specifically himself, you will get an additional 20% bonus. So for example, if Yuri does a holy damage attack that heals the entire party, he will fulfill all 3 conditionals at once, and on Yuri's turn, when he does that attack, you will get a 55% boost to FR bonus. The moment Yuri enters into Frost time, he will also party holy enchant the entire party, so it makes it extremely easy to meet the second and third conditional during his Frost time. The bonus here is that Gladiolus is making a comeback on Yuri's banner as well, and Gladiolus is a pretty strong character. Gladiolus's role is a cover tank, so in a way similar to Oran. However, his specialty is that he negates all brave and HP damage done to him, so he will reduce those damage taken all the way down to 0, so long as the enemy's attack does not ignore mitigation. At the same time also, he has self debuff immunity. The one big change is that his LD aura, or LD buff I should say, no longer lasts for 3 turns only. With his rework on this event, his LD buff now lasts a significantly longer 8 turns instead of 3, and this means that he can provide cover protection for a far longer time than he could before. The second banner does provide a rerun of Eldnotch, so you could pick him up there if you've missed Eldnotch or you want to pick him up. Eldnotch does have the unique ability to inflict the Terror debuff. He's the only character in the game that can do so, and when the Terror debuff is up, the enemies will be disabled on their turn as long as they are targeting Eldnotch. The drawback here, as always, is that the secondary banner does not feature a new FR weapon for the BT character, so Eldnotch still does not have any force weapon yet. And it is a question mark on whether or not you want to bring Eldnotch at this point in the game, although he does receive a rework with his kit. One note though, that the secondary banner does contain Rydia and her LD, and Rydia's LD call ability is still one of the better defensive calls in the game, so if you really want a defensive call for your roster, that is something that you could potentially consider as well. It's just a shame that Rydia's LD is appearing on the secondary banner and not the primary one. My plans here is to actually skip both banners. That's why I usually actually pull for the featured characters FR and BT, but this time I'm actually skipping because I don't really have a lot of interest in Yuri or his FR. Like I said earlier, the main issue I had during Lunafreya's arc was that I ran into a problem of having limited high power stones to max limit break FR weapons. So at this point I want to try to at least build up a few spare high power stones for the foreseeable future. The problem I have with Yuri really is that his damage is okay, it's not terrible, but there are better options for damage dealers. You could of course argue to say that he does offset his damage with at least some support capabilities in terms of party auras, but to me I don't really like characters like this where you have good damage but not top tier damage, and you have good auras but not top tier auras. I would rather bring a top tier damage dealer and another top tier aura bot support, and at this point of the game many people would have the aura bot option ticked because almost everyone pulled for Lunafreya anyway, so I would rather just complement Lunafreya with key DPS characters, and there are many strong ones coming very soon, and I know many people, for example, is hyped for Tifa, which is the next arc after this. Something that also made my decision to skip easier is that I already have all of Gladiolus's gear including his LD, so by skipping this banner I could still at least use Gladio with his rework in these few events. The next event coming up after that will be Vayne's Intersecting Wheels, featuring the return of Vayne with a return of his LD and BT, and this time his FR weapon will be newly released. At the same time, Vayne will also get a rework across his kit. Notably, his S1 and S2 now has 3 HP dumps each. 3 HP dumps might not seem like a lot, but don't forget that when Vayne's BT aura is up, he also gets, I believe, 2 additional HP dumps whenever he breaks an enemy. So this really adds up. In theory, when you are using Vayne, you want to re-break an enemy every single turn, so you will get additional HP dumps every single turn as well. In terms of his FR, it will cancel all enemies' break status before it does the attack, and it also grants him 3 stacks of his signature buff, the Conqueror's Power. His force time effects is really beneficial for his kit. When you break an enemy during force time, you will get a plus 20% force bonus. When you do any sort of melee attack on the enemy, and this also includes melee often, you get a plus 5% bonus. So this also could work on melee counter attackers such as Core or Gladio or Oran, you will get the 5%. And if Vayne does the melee attack, so this is specific to Vayne, you do get an additional 15% on top of this. In case you're thinking his FR bonus is pretty low, it's really not. For one thing, Vayne fulfills both the conditionals, and it's not just the 40% that he will get. Don't forget again that when Vayne's BT aura is up, he also does an additional melee attack when he breaks an enemy, and because the second conditional also counts often attacks, this means that when Vayne does an attack and it breaks an enemy and it triggers his BT follow-up, you will get 20% plus 20% plus another 20% bonus for his BT follow-up for a total of 60% instead. However, the drawback is that this is specific only to Vayne, since only Vayne will get the plus 15% additional bonus for the second conditional. So his FR in a sense is also as selfish as his kit, because he's always more or less a selfish turn hogger style DPS, and that itself actually isn't too bad. There are also of course other selfish turn hogger DPS that have done fairly well, and Vayne can work really well as well, not forgetting that it's very easy to chain consecutive turns with Vayne, and because a lot of his attacks will re-break the enemies, he will eventually sort of delay all the enemies through breaks into oblivion, and he could go into many consecutive turns in a row where he can trigger first the start of his force time and then take all 10 turns in a row, doing 60% additional bonus per turn all by himself, and this at least gives you the flexibility of complementing him with 2 other party members that can take advantage of his so-called turn hogging style of play. And this can include characters such as Young, which was recently released, or everyone's favorite Kane. I was actually interested in Vayne, and I actually do have his BT at base level already, so I could potentially pull for his FR weapon here, but again I am running into issues of having very limited high power stones at this point in the game, and I really want to try to conserve my power stones, my high power stones, as much as possible. For that reason, I am actually skipping this event and banners as well. It's really nothing against Vayne. I actually think he has a lot of potential, and he's maybe one of those underrated characters in the game. But however, at this point where I'm trying to conserve high power stones as often as I can, I am pretty comfortable with the DPS options that I have in my roster, and I think this is another good place where I can save my high power stones, so it's a skip for me. Finally, on this arc we have Core's event. Core was one of the GL firsts that we had in the past, but he does get a significant rework to his kit this time around. Firstly, beyond the usual damage increase across all the skills that characters get when they get their rework, Core's overhead now caps at 7 stacks instead of 10, which means that you could use Reaper's Gale, his signature rainbow attack, more frequently than you could before. Core also get a new FR weapon on this event, and his force weapon complements his playstyle as well as an often playstyle very well. You could probably see this as a new so-called iteration of Reno's FR, where it's heavily weighted towards off-turn damage rather than on-turn damage. When his force time is up, you get the 5% bonus anytime you do any sort of off-turn damage, and this really means any off-turn damage. So this includes Kayn and Freya's spears, counter attackers, and even trap-like damage. When you can do any brave hit that does more than 999 damage, so you do need to deal 10,000 damage and up brave damage during your turn, you also get the 40% boost to FR bonus. Finally, when Core is in force time, the entire party does get a plus 30% boost to brave damage done and 50% brave and HP damage reduction. In case you are wondering why it's only 5%, this is 5% bonus for every off-turn damage done. So for example, if an enemy is targeting the entire party, Core normally does 2 preemptive strikes, so you will get 5% twice because he does 2 strikes. Likewise, on this banner, you also have Gao as his banner mate, and Gao really deserves special mention, especially because he synergizes very well with Core's FR. As part of Gao's rework, his landslide counter now remains even after you use S1 and S2 use, so his landslide counter is tied to only his LD buff and will get triggered as long as his LD buff is up. This means that you could use Gao's LD to get his LD buff and use either S1 or S2 to enter into either stance, and whenever an enemy attacks, Gao will use both his LD counter and his S1 or S2 counter. Because Gao technically counter attacks twice, he will trigger the 5% boost twice as well. So in the event, say an enemy is targeting all, Core will do double preemptive strikes for a 10% bonus, and Gao will do double counter attacks for another 10% bonus. The timing is also very nice because this comes very close to Gladiolus' banner and rework, so you could also throw in Gladiolus in the mix if you haven't had a chance to pull for Oren before, and the three of them form a very strong counter attack and defensive core. Overall, my plan here is to go in with tickets. Since I've skipped the last 2 events, I think this is a good event to finally try pulling for the FR weapon. Depending on my luck, I may want to go in tickets until I get maybe even 1 or 2 FR dupes as well, because like I said, I really want to try to save on my high power stones. We have finally come to the part of the video where I'll cover my opinion, and I can't stress this enough, this is my opinion only, on which characters will probably give you more value if you have limited resources and you can't pull or build for all of them. As always, you should really focus on roles that fill gaps in your roster, which is why I generally group characters into either good value or so-called role fulfillment category. The good value characters are characters that I feel will provide you good value regardless of who else you have in your party. And to me, really, I think out of all the characters, Core is probably one of the best good value characters, especially in the Shinryu era where often damage has a ton of value due to the way force time and force bonuses work. This time around, I also added 2 other characters in the good value category, and these are Gao and Gladiolus. That being said, this is, I have to say, partly because of my bias towards both of these characters and how much emphasis and value I place on off-turn damage dealers. Between the 3 of them though, I will generally rate Core a bit higher than the other 2, but they work so well together, and that is also a contributing factor to why I put them together with Core. For Gao at least, he appears on the same banner as Core, so if you're pulling for Core, you might as well try to score Gao along the way, and like I said, they work really well together. Gladiolus is a bit more iffy, and I'm not saying that he's bad or anything, he is really extremely good. All I'm saying though is that many players would have pulled for Oren, so if you are really restricted in your pulling due to limited gems or tickets or other materials, you could potentially use Oren in this place instead of Gladiolus. But if you have resources to spare, even if you have Oren already, I would generally still recommend pulling for Gladiolus. Even though they cover similar types of roles in the sense of being cover tanks. For one thing, tanks are not as common as other roles, for example DPS characters, that you should try to have multiple different tanks in your party so that at least you cover a few different bases and you are covered if you have lockout content such as Dare to Defy. In addition, Gladiolus do have several differences than Oren, and in some fights Gladiolus I should say is probably preferred over Oren. For one thing, Gladiolus has the innate debuff immunity, which Oren doesn't have. Plus, Gladiolus mitigates all Brave and HP damage to himself, and by the fact that he also mitigates Brave damage down to 0, he also further reduces party damage that way, since the bosses will have a harder time building their Brave resources before they unleash their HP attacks. The other good thing I guess Gladio has going for him is that his EX will deal nice damage once more with his C90, and at least his EX doesn't actually delay the enemies, which is something that you may not want when you are having a so-called counter-attack strategy in your party, something that Oren doesn't actually have because Oren's EX actually delays all enemies. Finally, in the role fulfillment category, I placed 3 characters here, the first of which is Vayne, and it's really a shame. I think Vayne is one of those characters that is really underrated in this game. Many people say that he is such a bad DPS and he doesn't do a lot of damage. He actually does, because a lot of his damage comes from the form of free instant turns. So his damage per turn ratio is actually pretty good, and he also has the added utility of re-breaks as well, and he will eventually break delay all enemies into oblivion. His force time is pretty self-sufficient as well, so you could put him together with 2 other aura bot supports for example, and he should work fairly well. That being said, he is fairly high investment, because I think in this case, if you want to build Vayne's FR, you should also green Vayne's BT as well, because a lot of his force time bonus comes from his off-turn damage. So he is a pretty high investment character to use. As for Yuri, I guess he's okay, especially if you're fairly new and you want someone to fulfill your roster. He does provide some decent party auras. He does have the very niche but very unique ability to reduce all enemies' accuracy by 100%. And I know some people will say, yeah, but so does Kimari's EX for example. Firstly, this doesn't come in the form of debuff. It's actually tied to his BT aura, so it works even if the enemies are immune to debuffs for example. And secondly, at least Yuri is a sort of a better character to slot in your main party compared to Kimari at this point of the game. So Yuri really could work in a pinch. It's just I feel he doesn't really pop as top in mind when you're thinking of specific roles. You know, for example, if you want to bring your best DPS to the fight, you will hardly think of Yuri, and if you want to bring your best support character to the fight, likewise you usually won't think of Yuri as your first go-to person. Lastly, I placed Leon here, and I didn't really talk much about Leon, but he does come on one of the banners in this arc. And Leon always has the unique, although somewhat niche, ability to absorb brave damage to the entire party, as well as enchant the entire enemy party with the Dark Elemental. So in a nutshell, he does protect your party from non-elemental or Dark Elemental brave attacks, which can come in pretty handy. But as we've seen historically in this game, you don't really need that sort of unique mechanic to date. But I guess overall, you know, he does deserve special mention due to that ability of his, so for that reason I place him there. That's it for this video. In summary, I plan to skip both Yuri and Vayne's banners, and I plan to go in mainly with tickets for Chorus FR. Thanks for watching, and as always, if the video has been helpful, do leave a like, comment and subscribe. It really helps a lot. Till then, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!